I have to admit, I'm always a little bit nervous when I'm scheduled to give a homily on a secular holiday. The theologians and liturgists in the Vaticans, particularly those of many years ago, had no idea that the 12th Sunday in Ordinary Time in the year 2021 would be Father's Day. And so, as you can expect, today's readings were in no way selected for that purpose. But to my great relief, today's readings, I think, wonderfully align with Father's Day. In the first reading, God rebukes Job for his ignorant question. And one can easily imagine a parallel situation where a teenage son stomps his feet indignantly and asks his father, "Why can't I have my own car?" And instead of God's rebuke to Job that was, "Where were you when I founded the earth?" you can hear the father saying, "Who is it that bought and paid for this house you sleep in?" Or if we go to the gospel, Christ asks them why they have no faith about surviving a storm. And for me, it brings back memories of my dad driving the station wagon on a trip. And for you youngins, a station wagon, that's what we had before there were minivans and SUVs. We drove station wagons. But we were driving along, my mother beside him, and she would warn him, "Tom, there's a sign, no gas for 57 miles. And us in the back would be, "Yeah, and I think we're going uphill too." And then I'd hear my father boom, "Would everyone just calm down? We have plenty of gas." And so I think we can safely say that today's scripture is full of fatherly rebukes. And so I think it is appropriate for us to talk today about why and when rebukes are a good thing, and at the same time, the dangers that come from using them. And since fathers tend to be the primary dispensers of rebukes, I can claim a homiletic victory in bridging the divide between today's readings and Father's Day. The first thing to be said about rebukes is that they must be used sparingly and appropriately. There's a great risk that we use them at the wrong time or for the wrong reasons, or both. Rebukes are useful in combating three problems, in my opinion. Two of them are referenced in today's scripture. In the first reading, God is rebuking Job for his arrogance and his ignorance. And hopefully we all know that that is a horrific combination, that when you put together arrogance and ignorance, you get bad results. And thus, it deserves a strong rebuke. The second time for a good rebuke is to combat fear. And this is the scenario we see in the gospel. The apostles lose their grip on reason, and it is fear that drives them there. And this is why Christ rebukes them and the storm. And I would add a third time for rebuke is to combat dishonesty. And the reason that a rebuke can be warranted in these situations is that people in these places need to be jolted and rattled a little bit. They need to have an opportunity to reassess their mental state. To pick on the particulars of fear, fear is a self-reinforcing emotion. You get afraid and it brings up other fears and you go deeper and it gets worse. And so when somebody tries to talk to them calmly, dispassionately, using reason, someone who's truly in a fearful state is not interested in hearing it. And so a rebuke gives them the opportunity to take a step back, evaluate their fear, because we've starkly confronted it for what it was. And hopefully once that is done, then we can return to logic and reason and a more dispassionate discussion. But there's a very important caveat. We cannot fight fire with more fire. And so if we are to use a rebuke, we must be extremely careful that we are not ourselves coming from a place of arrogance, ignorance, fear, or dishonesty. I think a big part of the reason that rebukes have received a bit of a bad name in recent years is because too often those who use them are using them precisely because of those four things. They will be arrogant or ignorant. They will have fear. And they will use that as a reason to rebuke. And to make matters worse, they will be dishonest with themselves that that's where the rebuke is coming from. And so I plead with everyone, we must be extremely careful and check deep within our hearts and our soul for these four problems before we consider giving a rebuke: arrogance, ignorance, fear, or dishonesty. But once we have prayerfully searched our souls, and we have confidence that our motivation for the rebuke is indeed the good of the other person, a rebuke is a powerful tool, one that has been used for millennia by leaders to correct those who need correction. Too much of our society is dominated by fear. There is too much arrogant ignorance in our church. And it feels like everywhere I turn these days, I am confronted by condescending dishonesty. These problems are already here and will continue to get worse if we do not confront them. And they have wide-ranging negative effects on all of us. And so we need to fight them with every core of our being. We must confront arrogance with honesty. We must confront fear with reason. We must confront dishonesty without getting angry. And I believe it is fathers who must lead the way.